Okay, so today's class is about routing, right? Routing. So routing, it's called routing and pagination. So routing is essentially when we create an application, right? When we create a web application, that web application will have a lot of sections, right? So it can have like a front section, like a home section, and then it will have a login page, and then it will have like a dashboard section that only your users can enter, and then inside will have different pages for different functions, right? But you have to link from one page to the other for certain actions. Let me put an example. If you go to a page, a web page, and let's say a blog, in the home page, you will see just all the posts that you have, the latest posts, right? And if you click on a post, or like a headline of that post, when you click on it, you will go to that post page, right? So if you click here, you will get to that blog post page. Now, if our blog posts have 1,000 posts, do you think that we need to create 1,000 pages? No, right? We create a single page that can handle any post, and we only have to tell that page, this is the post that we want to render in that page, right? And then that page will render all that information. Now, how that information is managed is via the URL. Okay? So everything starts with the URL. And you know what URLs are, right? It's what that thing that we see on the top of the browser, right? It's the universal resource locator. So it's a unique way to identify a resource on the web, correct? Now, that resource on the web, the full syntax of a URL, I think we described some parts in the previous class, but let me write it again. So we first have the protocol, right? And then what we have? Okay, www, I don't know, server.com. Okay? And then what we have? The path. Now, the path can have multiple segments inside that path. So we can say, okay, I want to access, let's say, marketing, blog, post, 1, 2, 3, right? That will be the full path. And the path can be created by different segments, and we will learn how to create these segments. Now, there are some things that are missing in this URL. By the way, these are the must-have in the URL. All the URLs must have a protocol. That's the first part here. Actually, let me see if I can make this bigger. Yeah. So we always have a protocol. Interesting. So this is the protocol. Now we always have, this is the server. Now in the server, or the URL, we have something that we call the domain, right? But the domain technically is only the last two elements of that word. So www.server.com, the domain is actually server.com. And that's the part that you can buy. And that's actually the part that you buy, right? When you buy a domain, that's what you buy. Right? You're buying that last two elements of the domain. From that part on to the front, that's what we call the subdomain. And you will see that some applications have different subdomains, right? Mostly is 3W, but it could be app, it could be platform, it could be anything, right? Some applications use like something like this: myawesomeproject.com. If you manage to buy myawesomeproject.com, right? So you buy myawesomeproject.com, and you decide that in the subdomain app you will put a web application. But that means that you can, yes.
That subdomain doesn't necessarily have to be the same as the domain, right? Or it has to be the same as the domain, right?
No, wait. This is the domain, the last part.
Oh, you're talking about, okay.
That's the domain. That's the thing that you buy, right? In any cloud provider can send you a domain. Google domains, GoDaddy, Vercel as a cloud provider also sells domain, right? So that's what you buy. For example, I bought my name, ErnestoFreire.com, or my company's domain, codebySouthwest.com, right? I bought those. But that doesn't mean that I can put different apps connected to different subdomains, because I can put 3W and I can connect this to a Wix web page, right? And then I can say, well, app.codebysouthwest.com might be connected to a learning platform, right? So different subdomains can point to different web applications or websites, okay? Questions? Make sense? And by the way, subdomains, it can be even, and you've probably seen it, because when we use this one, for example, this is the URL from a code space, and check this domain, right? GitHub.dev is the domain, but the full subdomain is, well, it's only one word. Technically, you can have multiple words. That's uncommon, but you can have something like you can have domains, more subdomains separated by comma. Okay. So that's the domain and the subdomain. We have the protocol, and last part, this is the path name, or the path, right? That's the path. Now, there are things that they're missing here, and because they are optional, all URLs must have these three: protocol, domain, path name. Even if you don't have, like for example, if I have 3w.codebysouthwest.com, right? Even if I don't have a path name, you'll see that automatically it will put a slash at the end, right? That slash at the end means the path name. And the path name in this case is the root folder, right? It's the root of our application. So the path name will always be there. And actually, you can see it even on Google. If you make a request to Google, let me show you. If you make a request to Google, like this, right? Google will actually, no, it's actually doing the right thing, giving me the content. I would assume that it will, oh, for days the same. Okay, well, that's fine. So sometimes you send a request to a page, and that page will, if you make a request to one page like this, that page will send you a redirect. Hey, the first page is slash, because they want to have that root, right? The path name. So yeah, the path name will always be there, even if it's the root path. Now, these are mandatory. Now, there we have optional sections in this URL. And the optional sections, let me write this URL again. The optional sections are the port, right? So you can sometimes see URLs that have a port. Of course, the port is optional. You can have it or not, right? And you can also see some URLs that will have user password in the URL, right? That's also uncommon. You probably don't see much of this, right? But this is like the standard. That's how URLs should work, right? You can technically pass the URL and the password, add that domain, and that's a type of authentication. That doesn't work in today's browser because it's really not safe, right? Because of course the URL and the password is right there in the URL. That's not safe. That's the other one. And the one that we care about is the query string or query parameters. So this is after the path name, we can put a question mark, and after those question marks, we can write anything that we want. You can put anything there, but usually that section is structured in a key value fashion. Like for example, you can say UTM equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and name equals John. So now we have these optional sections for authentication. Not very common. We have another optional section here for the port. Also not very common. But this section here, we call query string or query parameters. Okay? Now, this is super common. And actually, you will see it in a lot of websites. Let me see if I have a website that has those. And now I cannot find one. That's funny. Give me like a website for actually, well, Twitter does it, but YouTube. Actually, YouTube does that. Right? So when you open a YouTube video, you see in the URL, let me copy
today
the.
we'll work with.
You will see in the URL for that YouTube video, right? The query parameters at the end. So these are the query parameters. Now, query parameters is essentially how GET requests takes data. Remember when we were making GET requests, when we were building forms, we usually send the data in post, right? So the data goes encoded in the payload of the request. But if we said, okay, we're sending that request using GET, all the URL, all the form data will be encoded in the URL. And that's the way we encode it, using query parameters. Now, if you notice it has an equal sign. That equal sign means that we will have an object with the K key, and the value will be this thing at the end, right? So that's the query parameter here. It's just encoding an object, right? Because if you have more than one parameter, then it will be an ampersand symbol, and then the second parameter, name equals John. So that means that here in my query parameters, I will have a name attribute, and then it will have the value of John.
Just not to get confused, you put K, but it would really be V, right?
Oh, right. My mistake. I'm not sure why I put.
Oh, you put K for key.
Oh, right. Thank you for that. Yeah. So every parameter has a key and a value. Correct? So that means that you can encode a lot of information also in the URL via query parameters. Now, there are two ways to encode information in the URL. Because the thing is, when you put your web application in a hosting, this section over here you cannot modify, right? You cannot modify the protocol. You cannot modify the domain because that's the domain you installed that application and you're deploying that application. But you can control the path name and you can control the query parameters. So we use a combination of path name and query parameters to control what part of our application is showing at a time, right? So listen what I'm saying. Routing is deciding if deciding is written with a C, deciding which part of our application is visible. Okay? By using the URLs, path, and query parameters. That's what routing is, in a nutshell, in the essence. Because, for example, if you go to the YouTube, let's go to the YouTube video, right? What is that YouTube video? Actually, that's the link. Okay, so when YouTube is a web application as well, right? So when YouTube sees that, it says watch, right? So the path name is /watch. Make sense? And then the V for video is that identifier. It's like a unique symbol, right? That means that it will open the watch page with that video in it, right? And that's what we see here. Oh, we didn't need to. Now, if I go to YouTube and I don't put any, this is still a path because the path will be /, right? And no query parameters. That means that YouTube will go to this page, the page that has all the videos, right? And if I go to, so yeah, oh, you mean if I go to watch and I don't put a video?
That's like a question mark. It's like the if else.
It goes back because it says I don't have any video here. Let me go back to the right. Okay, so if I do this ampersand a channel, right? Notice that the path is different now. The path is ampersand a channel. That means that I'm probably entering a channel, so that will show that channel. So every page is different. What page I'm deciding to open depends on the path name. Usually the path name or the path. We can see path name, path is the same thing, right? And then whatever content I want to see there depends on the query parameters. Now sometimes we can see applications that encode in the path name, encode more information because your path name can be more complex. Like you can have a path name. For example, YouTube has this watch video, right? So watch /watch means the watch page, and in the query parameter they put the video. But they might as well do something like this. Honestly, I don't know why they didn't do it like this. Right? It's the same thing. I'm encoding the same information. It's the watch page with it's the web page of the video 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So I can have both. I can have the page that I'm looking to open and the data that page needs, because some pages are dynamic, right? Some pages, let's put another example. If we have a blog, and actually let's make an example that we will actually use in class. Let's make, and I have an API for you, by the way. Let's have a profiles page, and in this profile page, I will have a list. And actually, I want something nicer. Let's have a card. Let's have cards with some persons, right? And I'll put the name over here. I don't know, John. Oh, John, Mary, Adam, whatever. So you have a slash profile page, and that page will have the list of all the profiles. But if you click on the profile, where do you go? You want to go to a page where I can see the full profile information. Make sense? So how do you think, what do you think we should call that page?
Slash profile,
Slash?
name.
The name or the ID of that profile, right? Something like this. So when I put those angular brackets means that there should be an ID there. You will see it like this. You will see it also like this, like whatever. What it means is that ID is dynamic. Actually, let's make it like this because that's the convention that we'll use. So when I go to this page, right? When I go to this page, what I will see is the information of that profile, but no longer in a car because I don't need a car now. I just need to show the picture of the person and then all the information of this person. Right? With probably a link to return back. And where is that link send me to? Well, if I click here, I go to this page. And if I click back, where do I go? To the profile, exactly. Got it? Make sense? You've seen this in a lot of applications already, right? It's not new for you because you browse the internet every day and this is what you see. You go from a page that have a bunch of information and you click and you go to a different page that have only information that you care, probably with more detail and more functionality, right? Now, you probably never pay attention to the URL on the top, right? Did you? You? Okay. Some of you pay attention to the URL on the top.
Not always, though.
Not always. No, and the other thing is that it's more, it's relevant for you as a developer, but for user it's not relevant. And actually, if you open Safari even kind of hides that section. It's like not important. Safari just removes that thing. Unless you click there and it will show you the full URL. Otherwise, it will basically say, no, this is this page and that's it. It will make something, Safari being Apple, they just make it nicer. But they don't care about the URL. Nobody sees that. Nobody pays attention to that, especially users. Okay? But that's routing at the end of the day, right? Now, React by itself doesn't handle this. React doesn't know how to route in a browser because it's not the job of React to do routing. Correct? The job of React is to have some data as a prop or as a state of a substance state, whatever, and render that data. That's all. You need a framework like Nextjs to implement some routing for you. And Nextjs do implement routing for us, right? So far we've seen the page routing. Right? Remember when we created the templates and we have a folder called pages? Well, it's slash source, it's slash pages because it was inside source. Inside that folder, we had actual pages and index was one of them. And index.js matches the root, right? The path name slash. Now, how do I create more paths in the page router of Nextjs. We can create just another file, right? And that means that this file will match to /about. Okay. Now, what about if I want to make sections? Remember, we can have one section with a single name, but we can have sections that have multiple segments, right? So what do? You just create a folder. So let's say we have profiles, right? You can create a folder, and inside that folder, you can create index.jsx. And that means that you have, and by the way, you can also create a profiles JSX, and that you will have profiles, right? That's okay. But the thing is that profiles will have more stuff inside, because I can go to profile / the ID of the profile. So I want to do something more complex here. So instead of a file with the name of the path, I will create a folder. And inside that folder, I can create an index, and that means that that index will be /profiles / nothing. Right? That means that every folder that you create will create a segment. And inside that folder, you can create an index, and that index becomes the root of that segment. So if inside profiles, I want to put another segment called students. And inside students, I want to create another folder called, I want to create another student called MDC /. And inside MDC, I create a file called index.jsx. What do you think will be the path of this page?
Profiles, students, MDC, /.
Exactly. So for every folder, you create a segment. Now, if you don't put that index there, and you try to access that MDC, it will basically be a page not found, because there is nothing inside, right? Questions? No? Okay. Now, this segment, like you can see, these segments are pretty much static. That means that I cannot create a segment that is dynamic. Like, for example, our profile, what is that? Oh, profiles ID segment. Now, if we want to create a segment that is dynamic, we can create a folder with square brackets, like this, literally like this. You can create a folder with square brackets. It's kind of like not common to see a folder with square brackets, right? But it's possible. So you create a folder with square brackets, and you create a JSX file inside. That means that this path will be profiles / anything, right? If I put 1, 2, 3 / here, that's the same page. If I put hello, how are you, that's the same page. Because it doesn't matter if it's numeric or it's text, it's just whatever is there, it will be captured by this segment. So this square brackets means a dynamic segment, right? And by the way, you can have multiple dynamic segments. Like, for example, if I have this here, of course, I'm creating this to be able to access the profile. But let's say you create here an action folder, and then you create an index.jsx. So what happens here? Can you give me an example of a URL or a path that matches this structure? Anything, right? Anything. And in this path, 1, 2, 3 is the ID and send is the action. So I can create as many folders I want, and if I create a folder with the square brackets, that means that it's dynamic. That the name is not set. I can put whatever name in the URL, and that will match that. Make sense? Questions?
You said that this isn't common, right?
Yeah, super common.
Oh, this is the common way to do it.
Wait. I'm saying that this is one of the ways to do it.
Okay.
So this is the page router from Next.js. And the other things that you see here in this pages folder, and you probably seen it before, is a file called _app.jsx and document.jsx. Check your template. It should be there, right? If I check my template, let me see my template. Sources, pages, right there. App.jsx, document.jsx, right? Notice that it has an underscore on the front, right? These are conventions because these two are part of Next.js specification. And that means that this document is how your app is rendered, right? Usually we don't touch this. We don't need to touch it unless it's really necessary. But this one is nicer in the sense that everything is wrapped by this component, right? So what I'm saying with that is that all your application, so everything that you put, remember, everything that you put in every one of these components will be the component that will be shown in that page, right? So if I create, let me delete this for a second. If I go to the index.jsx file, what I will see is a component exported using default function home. And this component, right, is a React component. So when I go to this route, the slash, the path, the root, this is the component that I will see there. If I have a different component in about, when I go to slash about, that's the component that the page will load. So every time I go to a different page, a different component gets rendered on the page. Whatever that index or about or any file is exported, right? You see, you have that already. Now, if I have the folder profiles, and inside that folder I create index.jsx, whatever component I export in that index.jsx will be that component that I will see in slash profiles, right? We already know that. Make sense? Got it. Okay, but now I need to know how do I access in the index.jsx of the dynamic segment, right? How do I access? What is the ID? Because remember that component, let's say I'm making the component for the profile, or profile page. Let's call it like that. So this is the component that will be here, connected here. From here to here, right? Now, how do I get the ID? I need to get the ID.
Query parameter?
It's the query parameter. It's not the query parameter, but close. But how do I get the query parameters? How do I get access?
In the URL, you're putting in the URL.
Yeah, but in your code, you need to be able to see in your code, hey, give me the ID so I can make a query to the backend using that ID to get the information. Sorry?
You have to fetch the information somehow?
Yeah, I mean, this is the profile.
Yeah.
No. Okay, let me explain how we make this. So there is a hook called use router. Okay, there is a hook called use router, and that router has something called query, and that query should have the ID, and that's how we get the ID. Okay, in that particular page, because that page is connected to it has a segment that is dynamic, and the name is ID. If I put a different name here, like for example slug, I have to change this to slug because it depends on the segment. If I have a segment that is like this, profiles ID action, right? And I want to access the ID and the action. This is where I access ID. And this is how to get the action from the query. Okay? But I need to use that use router hook. Got it? Now, when you link from one page to the other, and we already saw that, you use the link component from Next.js. And it works the same way as a regular anchor tag, but you have to specify what is the path that you want to access. If you want to specify with query parameters, then you specify the query parameters. I don't know, whatever that query parameter is. Okay? Questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, how do we get I mean, where do we store the IDs?
We don't have to store it.
And then how are we supposed to get those IDs?
Perfect. Now that you ask. Okay, so let's do something, because page router was the default router of Next.js up until last year, when they added an app router. And we will also learn that app router. But I want you to see both, because sometimes it's easier to build an app using page router, like the ones that we are building. But sometimes it's nicer or more updated to use the new app router. So we have page router, and we also have app router. Okay? Now, what I want to do with you today is build an app. It's actually build this app. I mean, it's super simple. 2 pages, profiles ID. Let's build it first with page router, and then let's see how can we build that with app router, right? We will probably have to leave app router for future classes. Actually, probably next week, Wednesday, Friday, because it's way more complex than page router. Like the way the thing that you see here in page router, they are pretty simple, nothing complex. In app router, there's a new concept, there is a new way to create things there. So we will not touch that yet until you get a better hang of what routing is. Once you understand routing using the page router, that is the simplest one, then we can go to the app router. Make sense? Cool. So let's do that. Let's create this application. Again, it's just 2 pages, so you can don't create a new project. Just go to your template and let's do it over the template, okay? Because we can create it in a branch inside the template. You don't have to modify or create a new project for that, okay? So this is what we want to build. 2 pages, profiles with a bunch of profiles. These profiles we will get from a backend, okay? And then when you click on one of the profile cards, it will send you to a page that has the profile information, and then we can query for the profile information, more information. Okay? Now, the URL for this is this one. Now, if you want to check it out, you can go to that URL, and this is what you're going to see. It's returning just a JSON array of 5 user profiles, and for every profile you have an ID, you have age, this is goal, name, skills, hobbies, picture, very AI looking picture. Okay, so I have okay, so this is one of the endpoints, /API/profiles.
You put demo.nestjs.com/what?
/API/profiles. This is just an endpoint that returns an array of profiles with some data. Now, if you use one of these profiles, ID, like this, for example, if I copy the ID and I use it in the URL after profiles, I get only the information for that profile, right, as an object. And this is also very common. In one endpoint, you get the whole list. In the other endpoint, you get only one record. Okay, one is an array, the other. Yes, it said that I have a plugin that reformats JSON, and so it shows pretty. But yeah, that's the same thing. So this is what I'm saying is that this is the API that we're going to use. Okay. Questions? No? Okay, let's do, and you have to follow along. Let's create a template. Well, don't create a new project. Just use your own template, right? Use your
extension call for the JSON reformat.
Yeah, something like that. JSON prettify or JSON. Okay. If you want to use my own template, of course you need to, well, it's public, so you can do whatever you want there, just won't be able to save it. This is the template I'm using. Okay? So you don't have a template, I mean, you all have a template, so that's pretty much it. Okay, I'm here, and I can do npm from dev. And I will see in the browser something like this. I mean, my template is pretty basic. It doesn't have anything. Yeah, that's my template.
Profile, I mean, this page is called, you call it like a profile page or something? What do you call your-
Yeah, we need to create a page, right? Because remember, what we're going to build is this. We have a profiles page and a profile ID page. Okay? So how do we create the profiles page? We create a folder, right? Remember, this is page router. You see the page folder, and you can create a folder here called profiles. Now, right now, if I go to /profiles in my application, what I get is 404, right? Not found. There is nothing in there in slash profiles. I created the folder, but there is nothing inside that folder. I have to create an index JSX and create a component here. Export default function profiles page. Okay. Now, if I refresh my app, you see now in the profiles page. I mean, I can make it look a little bit nicer, but I don't have time for that. So let's put a container here. Okay, nice. A little better. So one page, one route slash profiles, sorry, with plural. So for every folder that you create, you are creating a path, segment in that path. Now, if I want to create more folders, this one will be the ID of the profile, right?
You create it as a folder.
As a folder, yeah, it's a folder because inside that folder we need to create the index. Yes. So new file.
And the index of the profile.
Yes. And same, export default function profile page. This is singular, profile. I don't know what profile number is yet, but I will check it out. So now I have slash profiles, but I also have slash profile slash whatever I want to write. And that will be the profile, that other component. Okay? So profiles, go to one path or one component, and profiles slash anything. And when I say anything, it doesn't have to be numbers. It can be letters. That's still that ID, right? So check this out. Profiles, ID, index, and also index inside profiles. So I have a file called index. This is the index for profiles, and this is the index for profiles ID. Got it? Questions?
So inside profiles, we have to create the ID folder and then.
Inside that folder, we have to put an index as well. This is essentially how browsers or servers work in the first version of the internet. Right? The first version of the internet, servers were serving folders with files, right? And you can put the path of the folder and the file that you wanted. And if you didn't specify a file, it will go directly to index.html. This is the same, except that we're creating React applications, so it's index.jsx. So whatever that index.jsx have, that's what will be served there, right? So
This is like profiles slash brackets ID. Is that how it's supposed to appear? Like it doesn't appear like your hierarchy where ID is a folder within profiles. It shows profiles slash ID as the file name. But if I move it out, then it does have index.jsx within it, like it's a folder, but it never appears like a secondary folder within there.
wait, what do you mean? Do you see it like this? Like what I'm seeing here? Profiles have index inside, and it has.
No, the ID thing is right on
Slash
top of,
ID.
next to the profiles. Because I have the same thing.
You put it in the wrong folder? Oh, because if you don't have anything inside, it will show it right there. But if you want to create
But if I drag it out, index is inside there.
No, 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 don't do that. Don't move it, don't move it.
Too late.
No, no, okay. So you have, this is the issue, this is the issue. If I delete this index,
So delete it right now. Alright, I don't wanna touch it.
Ese es el intento, entonces, o decir, hubiese un patch que no hubiese pagado más, no aparece.
well, it, let me see, because it sometimes shows like that. So you have to right click on in ID to create a folder inside, a file inside. Well, not in my,
But it's like selecting both profiles / indexes.
no, 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 no. Right click on ID, new file. That file will be created inside in the ID. Oh, actually no. How do you create that ID?
Oh, magic. I have no idea.
No, no, wait. There's something wrong here.
I think what happened was I created my ID folder while it's still empty, like what you said, and then I created index.js. I should have done it separately while I was outside or
No,
something.
it's fine. But you should be able to click there, right click. Oh,
See how it's like.
oh, right. No, it's because that ID file is inside. So you need to create a file inside profiles. Right click there. New file, index.jsx.
Oh, like it's looking better. So right click on the say index.
You see? Now
And
you
then
have.
delete this one, right?
No, you need both.
Okay.
That's now it's correct.
Okay.
I'm still getting the 404 error. I'm not sure why.
Wait, what are you getting?
404.
You're missing a file then.
Missing a file?
Yeah. Okay, so you need a profiles folder with a file index.js inside, and then an ID folder inside that profiles, and then another index.js file inside that ID folder, right?
No, I'm still getting this one.
Wait, let me stop the recording.
So that file right there is the index file within ID, right?
Yeah, this is the index file within ID. Yeah, this one.
Don't you kind of worry that you might make a mistake? I mean, I'm sure it's common that people make mistakes where they're,
Put the wrong file in the wrong. Yeah, definitely.
so like, is it? I mean,
Yeah,
it
it's.
could be like a.
No, it's correct. Your assumption is correct. Mistakes will be made. That's.
Okay.
You have to be careful. Yeah.
I'm getting an error when I'm trying to get the ID index, the ID page. It says the default export is not a React.
Remember that the other important thing for pages
For default.
is export default. Now, why export default? Remember that we always tell export function instead of export default. We know the difference between the default and name. So name export, default export. And it's because nobody will import this component. Nowhere in your code you will import this component. So it's a default import, export. Next.js is the only one that is taking whatever this file is giving me as a React component. That's what I'm going to print in that page. So I don't have to give it a name because I know it's whatever. It's the default. When you are creating your own components, you use name exports. So it's easier to import. Make sense? But here, these are pages, so you don't need to name them. So just export default. Questions? We got the two? Perfect. Now, we have the API, right? We have this API that we created. And by the way, this data is just straight up from ChatGPT. I asked ChatGPT, do it if you need to create something on the fly. I asked ChatGPT, can you create 5 characters with fictional information and it created, and then I say, okay, put it in a JSON file, and created the JSON file, and then I say, create illustration for all the 5 characters, and those are the images that you see there. So it was like 3 prompts, and you have all of that, right?
From the tender.
What I'm saying is that use it, right? Don't be afraid to use it. Use it, because the thing is that at this age and at this moment, if you're a developer and you're not using AI, you are slower than some of the developers that are using AI, right? And at the end of the day, it's just cost. It's like who can build it faster. Cool. So we're going to use this API. Okay. Now for that, let's create first the first page, the profiles page. Now, remember, how do we fetch information? What's the first thing that we create? Not a hook. We have to create a function that queries for that information. We encapsulate that functionality.
Yeah.
So we create a function. Inside that function, we use the fetch function from JavaScript to fetch the information, get the JSON of that from that information, and then just return that. Okay? And that will be an asynchronous function. So we can create a folder here called services. Notice that services is outside pages. Everything that you put inside pages will be a path, will be a route. So don't put anything inside pages. Inside pages, you only put your paths, your routes. And let's create here the get profiles JS. So we'll create a function called get, well, it's an asynchronous function, get profiles. Okay, and this function will fetch from the URL using await and I will get the actual data and return that data. And this is my get profiles function. Remember, the only way I can use async await to be able to create a synchronous function is we need to put async before function when we're creating the function. So we are signaling to JavaScript that this is an asynchronous function. And inside that asynchronous function, we can use await. So we can use await to fetch the data from the URL, and then we can use await for the response, because that response.json, if you check the documentation, you see that returns a promise. And because returns a promise, I need to wait for that promise, and the best way to do it is using await. If this function didn't return a promise, I don't need await. I can just say response.json. But then data is the data. But now you see that data says, oh, it's a promise, right? So I better put away. And now the data is anything that comes from the...
I saw a video regarding this, and they were using promises and then using promises.then.
Yeah.
Is that an actual good
You
way
can,
to do it?
No, not today. Probably 5 years ago, yes, but not today. Because now you have a sync away. So it's cleaner and easier to read than then. The problem with then is that sometimes you have Google then something like then hell or something like that. It's like the then health, the health of then. And it's basically, I mean, I have to do it. I have to Google it now. Then health. In JavaScript, of course. Oh, Caldwell health. And this is
Yeah, they told about this.
it's super. I mean, it's an issue. Well, it's not callback hell. It's the
So you basically have callback after callback. Right?
exactly. You see, you have code like this. It's super hard to read and hard to debug. Not good. Actually, Promise Hell. That was the name. Promise Hell. There is no good solution there. The good solution is, and this article is probably from 2016, of course. Async await was not even invented there. So people were trying to work with what they have, right? With then and then try to reformat it in a way that was easier to read. Not good.
So basically, right now, promises are not a good way to fetch information.
Yeah. They are still promises, right?
But using
Then and try no,
promise that then.
and cache is not the best way. You see that fetch returns a promise,
Yeah.
right? They're still promise, but the way we handle them is different. Instead of using .then or .cache to capture the error, we use await, and that basically stops the execution right there. So when I make this request, this instruction is executed, the whole code stops there until I get the response, right? This is easier to read. I mean, there is.
Call this JavaScript and,
Oh, sorry?
no, we have to call this JavaScript and
No, we have to. This function we will call it now, but
yeah.
we will see it now. Okay, so we need to call this function, correct? Now let's make it simple this way. We are not going to add React query unless, well, we can add React query later, but let's create a first version of this just using a state and a fed hook. Okay, so let's create a state.
The profiles in there.
Yeah, profiles, set profiles, use a state, empty array. So my first state for profiles is an empty array. And then I can use an effect. And in this effect, I will only run it once. I will call the function get profiles, and then I need to use then set profiles. Okay, so that means that now I have the profiles loaded in my application. I just need to render them, right? What do we use to render arrays? A map. So we can do profiles.map, and actually let me put a UL tag. And I will render it as li tags. And I will just render the name, profile.name. Of course, I need the key here, and that will be profile.id. Okay.
What was the naming you used for the hook?
For the hook? Wait, what do you mean?
No.
So with this code in place, I have a state, right? State, remember, it's local state for that component. That state will hold the list of the list of profiles, and I have an effect that will only run once. Can someone explain me why this effect will only be executed once?
Because you didn't pass the time.
The what?
You didn't set the second parameter?
The second parameter is an empty array. That means that it will only run once. Okay? After the component is rendered the first time, it will render the effect, it will execute the effect, and that's it. It will not be executed anymore. But this is calling the function to get the profiles, and then it's setting the profiles using that value that we're getting back. Now I should see a list of oh, I know what's going on. It's a course error. Yeah, course. Okay, let me. Well, write the code. I will fix that error. By the way, when you see a course error, and you can Google it, course, cross origin, resource. Not sure what the last word means. It's basically a way to prevent that a domain in the browser, a domain access resources from a different domain, right? You can still do that. Some web applications can do that, but you have to put something on the back end to allow that to happen, right? When you see a course, what I'm trying to say is when you see a course error, there is no way to solve it on the client side. This is always something that you need to fix on the backend side, okay? Because I've seen people, especially in the channel, the support channel, hey, I have a course error. How do I put in the client to fix it? No, there's no way to fix it in the client. It's always in the backend, okay? So I will have to fix that. But again, here. So I have the function, I call the function, whatever the function returns, I set it as the profiles, and I render that information. I will fix the course error now. Questions? Of course, this is not the optimal way to do it, because remember, for that we have React Query. Okay? So what we're going to do after this, after we make this work, we will actually install React Query and use React Query to fetch that information. Okay? Cool. Let me stop this. Okay, so I was explaining, just for the video, that we don't want to use a state and a fed hook, right? We want to use React Query because it will manage the whole query and the whole fetch lifecycle for us. So we are going to delete this section here, and we're going to install and configure React Query. Now, React Query we can find the documentation, and let's install it. So to install, we install this package, tanstack React Query. So I need to go to the terminal. Okay, so I need to install React Query. The package name is tanstack/React Query. That's the package that I want to install. npm install --save tanstack React Query.
What do we need that save again?
Is to put it in the package file. So if you check once you do that, you check your package.json file, you will see that that dependency is listed there. That means that the next time you open that project and you do npm install, React Query will be installed too. If you don't do npm install --save, will not add it to the package.json.
So that's I mean the --save it's only useful when you're creating a template.
No, it's always.
Oh yeah, I got you.
Always.
Yeah.
Okay, so we installed React Query. Now, to React Query requires for us to configure it in a way that everything in our application is wrapped by this query provider. So we need to go to the app file, the file that is named _app, is in the pages folder, and right there we need to import query client provider. We need to install query client, and I think those are the ones that we need to install. By the way, the instructions for this are right here. Quick start. You see that you have to put query client provider with a new client right here, and then you have to wrap your whole application with that in the app. So that's our app component. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to create the client, and then we're going to wrap query client provider. Client is query client. And now we have React Query configured.
Is it easier just to go
To go, what?
to get that code?
Sure.
Okay, just like-
There you go. Yeah, it will save you some time. But you still need to install React Query in your project. Okay. Okay. Install?
Wait.
No?
Did you have to run that to the command line?
You have to install. Yeah, you have to run a command line npm install -- save.
Oh, yeah. You installed
I share this components code in the Slack channel, so you can get it from there. By the way, most of the projects that you will work will already have most of this stuff already configured. You don't have to, every time you want to use React Query, install it, configure it, and then use it, right? It will be already installed and configured for you most of the time. If you are creating a new project, yeah, then that's a different issue. But this is only one time. We don't have to touch it anymore. Cool. Now, how do we change our profiles page to use React Query?
The index query?
Yeah, in the index for the profiles page, we use. Actually, we can do data equals use query, and we have two properties that we need to pass: query key, profiles, and query function. Get profiles. Okay? Now, remember that what we get is data. Actually, we can also get is loading. So we can do something like this. If it's loading, return and instead of profiles, I have to use data here. And that's all. There you go. You see the loading that shows up at the beginning? When you open the page, it says loading, and then it loads the whole thing. So now we're using React Query to fetch all of our information with all the benefits of React Query. We have its loading. We have, we can refetch. Remember, we can refetch window on focus. True. We can refresh on an interval. Not really necessary for this page, right? Because the data here is not changing much. So maybe I don't need to have an interval. But the refresh on Windows Focus is really good. And this will give you kind of like a sense of real time, because users, when your users are using your application, they sometimes move to a different browser or a different page, right? And they go back to your application, maybe to copy and something and paste it in your application. Every time you go back, the data gets refreshed, and it will look like the data is live. It's actually not. It's just an effect. It's just like an illusion, because every time you go to your web page, to your web application, a refresh is executed, and now the data gets updated, right? So it's not real-time data, but it looks like real-time data. Got it? Cool. So that's my version of the same page, but now I'm using React Query.
Why is taking so long?
Something is wrong.
Okay, so profiles, it's not defined.
Because I changed profile for data over here. Questions? Questions? So you should have, when you run your application and you go to the profiles page, you should see the renderings, right? Now, of course, this is not complete, but I will not provide the rest. Remember that we want to create a card with certain information. We want to create something like a card. I would not do that. You will create a card. That's up to you. And the card can have the picture, because one of the data that we have for every profile is the picture. So we can use a picture of that profile in the card. That's up to you. Now, but we need to be able to link from this page to the profiles page. So instead of just showing the names, I want to make the names a link to the profile page. Okay? So let's make that link. So here's the profile name. I want to make this name a link. And remember, for linking between pages, we use the link component. Link component, that means uppercase L, link. You see that is imported from Next/link. Now, what's the href that I'm going to link it to? The href will be /profiles/ the ID of this profile. So $profile.id. And that's my link. Okay? Notice that the expression for the href is a string template. I'm using backticks. So that means that I can put /profile/ and then the rest of that string is the ID of that profile. So every link that I have here now links to a different ID. You see? When you hover over them, and if I click it, I will send my user to the profiles/ID. So if I click here and check the URL says profile/the ID of that profile.
Can I see the code?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so we link from the profiles page to the profile page using that ID. So we have /profile/ID. The ID that we're using, this ID that you see here, right? This is what we call a UUID. And usually have this syntax or structure, and this is what we call a universally unique identifier. When it says universally unique, is that I think there is like a metric of every file in GitHub, like there is a lot of files in GitHub, right? You can calculate a UUID for every file in GitHub, and you would not have two UUIDs the same, right? So you can get the measure of how many UUIDs you can have. Like pretty much anything can have a UUID attached, right? So it's really hard. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying that it's really hard to two computers get the same UUID.
So when you asked ChatGPT to give you this fake content from Super, because that came from the Super demo.
Yeah, but I didn't ask ChatGPT to create UUIDs
Oh, okay, so where'd you get those?
from the database that I'm using, and you will see it next week,
Okay.
right? But that's usually what we have, a UUID, right? Now, how can I get that ID from the URL in this page? Because I need to know what is the ID here to be able to make a query to the database and get that profile information, correct? So what do I need to do? First we need to create the function to get one profile by ID. So we will create a new function called get profile by ID.
So that basically is an interface, right? Each one of the services are interfaces.
What do you mean
Like
interfaces?
the
It's an API, right? It's an API. /profile will give me all the profiles. /profile.
I mean the services.
Oh, yeah. Those are the interfaces with the backend. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a way to abstract your components from that logic of communicating with the backend.
Basically, there you have all the operations. to get,
All the
post,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So let's make a function here. Well, it's an async function to get a profile by ID. And the parameter that I want to pass here, what is the parameter? The ID, of course. Now, this is pretty similar to the get profiles, right? So I will copy the code from get profiles. But it will have at the end the ID,
This is the part I like.
right?
This is the part I like.
So instead of getting the whole list, I'm adding that, and that's because the API that I'm using is expecting the same. It's expecting /API /profile /the ID, and that will give me a single ID. You can try it actually. You see that profiles will give you the whole list, but if you use one of the IDs and you put /profile /that ID, and it will give you only one profile, right? The one that you requested. Of course, if I am in the page for that profile, I don't need the information of all the profiles. I only want that information. Okay? I don't want to load that page. Okay, so in the code, that's what we have. I'm passing an ID, and I'm adding that ID to the end of the URL.
Of course, I can use string interpolation.
Of course, yeah. So with the string interpolation, there will be something like this. Yeah, like that. With a string interpolation. So depending on the API that you're using, you need to be able to craft the URL that you want to query and create the request using fetch, getting the response. So you are basically encapsulating the whole behavior in this function. This function only cares about the ID, and it will give you the information back. That's all. Now, let's go to the index again, the profile page index.jsx. So right here, the first thing that we need to get is the ID of that in the URL, right? Because remember, we have the ID, but we have it in the URL. And I told you that we need to use a router. So we need to use a hook called useRouter. And from that hook, we can get the ID. Now, once we have the ID, let's try to replace it here. And let's see again this page. Notice that I'm using useRouter. Of course, it needs to be imported from router. That's the router. It's an object that allows me to get information about the URL and allows me to modify the URL. But in that router, I have a property called query. And in that query property, there should be the ID that is in the URL.
We don't have to call the get profile by ID?
No, not yet. I'm just getting the ID. And notice that now I'm saying profile, and this is the ID. Now I have the ID in a variable that I can use, right?
Oh, okay.
That's the first step. First, I need to get the ID. What is the profile that I'm querying? That's the first thing. And I get it from the router using the query property. Notice if, let's do something here. Console.log router.query. I mean, this is not technically correct, but let's see what we have in the console. And in the console, you will see an object with that thing, right? Now, the only problem that I'm seeing here, and this is a Next.js issue, is that query will have the path segments that are dynamic, like for example ID, but it will also have all the query parameters. So if I add a query parameter at the end of my URL, notice that this will be profile ID page, right? So it will go to that page, but will also have a key parameter called name with the value John. So if I enter here, you see name John ID that. So query have everything. It has the path name sections, and it will have the query parameter properties. You see it right here, right? ID and name. But in this URL, ID is this. It's part of the path name, and then name is in the query parameters. Two different sections. That's my only not criticism, because I'm not even pretending that I'm criticizing this team because they are amazing. But it's kind of confusing, right? Because this is the path name. The path name gets up to this point. And then we have the query parameters. But notice that the ID is this, is also in the query. Right? ID and then the name. John. They should be separated, but that's fine. They fixed it in the app router, by the way. Cool. So now I know what's the ID. Okay? Now I can use the use query hook. Now, query function, query key. Now, the query key, this part is really important. Query key, you will be seeing that we use the query key as an array, right? Why is an array? It's because this array will allow me to do this, profiles, comma, and then I can put the ID here. This serves two purposes. When I am invalidating, remember when we invalidated queries before? What happens when we invalidate a key? We basically remove the data from the memory and we force the hook to reload that data. So go to the back end and get that data again. So this serves the purpose of including this data as part of the invalidation, because if I invalidate profiles, I will invalidate this and I will invalidate the one in the other page. Profiles, right?
I didn't get any things that.
Now, what is the query function?
Get profile by ID.
No. That's a different here. Because the query function cannot get parameters, and we have a function that has parameters, right? Get profile by ID has a parameter. But the query function should not have parameters. So here we need to create an arrow function and say get profile by ID, and then pass the ID there. So instead of passing get profiles directly or get profile by ID directly, we need to do an arrow function that doesn't have parameter and then use ID as the parameter. And of course, we can now say if it's loading, return, container, loading. And once we have the data, now we can actually say, well, this is the profile for data.name. There you go. Now let's make it a little bit more interesting. H2, please. Oh, I need to import image. Image source. Wait, what's the error? Oh, it's missing required width property. Oh, okay. Yeah, we need to set a width of 100 and a height of 100 as well. And we probably need an alt. Profile picture. Okay. I'm trying to play nice, and you're not play nice. There you go. Oh, let's make it.
Source was,
No, it's just that Next.js has an image component, but it's really it's kind of finicky. So I remove it and I use the native HTML image.
yeah.
Right now I have to probably set a width and a height, so it's smaller. There you go. Now, this page now works for any profile because it's basically loading whatever is on the ID, right? If we go back and we select a different one, it will load that profile information and that profile picture. Notice that the data is already loaded. It's already there when we go back to the page, right? And that's another benefit of using React Query. It's because the data is cached. So when you go back to that page, you say, I already have this in the cache, so I will show that. It will still load on the backend, and if the data is different, it will reflect that. But because the data is not different, it shows like it's faster, right? It's not because it's faster, it's because it's caching, right? The data. But that's already implemented for you. Sorry?
Can you go back to the JSX?
Yeah, sure. There you go. So again, we use router to get access to the routing information. Okay? The routing information is what's the path name, what's the query, and we use query for that. We use query to get the parts of the URL that are dynamic. In this case, the ID section, the ID segment. And we get that from router.query, right? ID. We use ID here because that was the segment that we created. You see that segment, it says ID. If we use a different segment name, we will have to use that segment name here. Okay? Let's say, for example, I want to change this folder name to be UUID. Okay? If I change that, I need to change it here to be UUID because that's what I want to get. The UUID from the URL. You see the difference? Got it? Because that's what we have in the URL. It's a segment called UUID that will be dynamic. So if I need to get that in my component, I need to get it from router.query and then using the segment that I want to access. In this case, is UUID. It doesn't matter that the variable name I'm using is different. I'm just need to get that segment. Now, use query. I use the query key, profiles ID. So it includes the profiles word and the ID. That means that if I invalidate profiles, this will also be invalidated. Okay? It's technically a profile, so it should be invalidated. And for the query function, because this function has a parameter, we need to create a narrow function. Notice that the difference between this query function and the one for the profiles page. Here we're just using getProfile. But this is technically the same, right? This is the same. It's just that we don't need to do it. We can pass just the function and that's it. Okay? Now, the data is whatever we are getting back. In the case of the profiles, we were getting an array. So we can use map on that array. In the case of this page, it's an object, so we can get the properties directly from the object. We can get the name, we can get the picture, and actually we can get a lot of other things. Let's see what else we have here. Data dot. I don't remember the rest of the properties, so let me see here. Okay, we have backstory. There you go. Okay. Questions?